So it looks like we've got the confirmation for a new and exciting plastic miniature range from Games Workshop. Let's take a look at Sentinels and Las Rifles from Games Workshop's new teasers. Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today I thought I'd cover the news that Games Workshop have basically let the cat out of the bag on the mystery army that they had coming for Warhammer the Horus Heresy, and have given us a few rather interesting teasers of miniatures to come for the setting. Games Workshop does tend to round out the year with a few teasers for their gaming systems. Over the past couple of days we've had ones for Warhammer 40k and then Age of Sigmar. For the 40k one we got the big orc mech thing, a Custodes with a shield, spear and crest, and a Kroot cavalry for the Tau. Today we've got some interesting teasers for the Age of Darkness. By far the most interesting news I think is basically the confirmation as to the identity of the mystery army Games Workshop had teased previously for winter. This was looking like it was going to be quite likely to be Solar Auxilia before, but now we have that basically confirmed. 2 miniatures teased for the faction that can basically be nothing else. Earlier in 2023, Games Workshop gave us one of their bigger teasers for the year, giving us a release timeline for both 40k and Horus Heresy, just a rough guide for what to expect over the next few seasons. We've already had most of the autumn and winter reveals so far. We had the new Primarch that turned out to be Fulgrim Transfigured, new Cerastus Knight variants, including the Acheron and Castigator, Derridio Dreadnoughts, and an Assault Squad. The single most interesting thing on the entire schedule, though, was a mystery army release built for winter. And to my mind, I feel like anything that you'd bill as an army release for Heresy was probably going to be one of three things. Either the Forces of the Mechanicum, which went really quite heavy on Cybernetica Automata in the days of the Heresy, or potentially a Custodes or Sisters of Silence release in plastic, and that would have been a very interesting thing indeed for 40k collectors. I'm sure there's lots of people out there who'd like to see the Fancy Forge World Dreadnoughts reimagined in plastic, or the Caladius tanks and things. Despite those options though, it did seem that by far the most likely release would be Solar Auxilia, due to them having been released in Legions Imperialis, and it kind of made sense with them at the very forefront of that setting that they'd probably get some love in the Heresy era of the game as well. They are an army that you can collect and play in the Heresy era setting already, with at least a fairly extensive resin range that is still in production, and it looks like, given that this is an army release, it looks like the core of that will be shifting to plastic, maybe with resin just as options beyond that. That brings us to the teasers today though, Games Workshop giving us silhouettes with a quick turnaround that really don't leave much to the imagination as to what sort of model's coming out. And it looks like the first and perhaps most interesting out of those is this Heresy Era Sentinel, done in a similar sort of style to the Ethon Heavy Sentinels that they showed off for Legions Imperialis. I felt like that Ethon Sentinel miniature was perhaps a particularly conspicuous one, given that that doesn't have a full-scale equivalent at all, and there's no reason that you couldn't just use that as a Heresy Era unit. I don't know whether that one will also get a release, but it looks like this Sentinel is basically the regular Sentinel equivalent of that. The same thing, but without the big enclosed compartment at the top with a heavier gun and missile launchers, but looking like it is mounted on basically the exact same legs as the tiny Legions Imperialis miniature, having the same sort of front plates but with a vision slit and an exposed rider behind that. Looks like it's armed with a multi-laser, perhaps the single most iconic armament for Sentinels throughout the ages, though I guess it's possible that we might have different weapon options as a choice for it, given that it'll be a plastic kit. I noticed that this image had also been posted in a couple of places on the internet, which I believe came from a user called the Wizard Blundermore on the 30k subreddit, who's used Photoshop just to get a bit more differentiation between the very low lighting conditions and get us a better picture of the miniature. You can basically see the entire thing here. I think you could make out most of the important details from the silhouette and the turnaround, but really quite nice to see it in a bit more clarity. Big props for making the effort to do a little bit of image manipulation there. I kind of wonder if they're trying to make a few nods back to older style Sentinels, like this older one for the Astra Militarum or the even older boxy egg-like Sentinel. Obviously very retro designs from a previous era, but perhaps feel at least a little bit more similar stylistically compared with the modern 40k Sentinel, exposed crew and a single forward-facing gun, rather than one mounted off to the side slightly. Otherwise, the other clearly Solar Auxilia miniature that we saw in the teasers is this one. Here's the pictures of him from 3 different angles. You can see it's basically an Auxilia trooper that's armed with a las rifle it has the sort of stylized medieval sort of helm that they have, and this guy's got a standard protruding from his back, with some other bits looking like they're stored on his backpack. Giving that a quick search, it doesn't really look like it's too hard to find the miniature that inspired this one. It's really quite similar to the back standard of the guy on the right here. The helm looks really quite similar to the more standard infantry, and there's not really any doubt that this could be anything else other than Solar Auxilia infantry. Between those two and the fact that we haven't had any other teasers for anything like Custodes or Mechanicum units, and these guys are supposedly coming out in winter, it does seem that the Solar Auxilia are going to be the Mystery Army release, and I feel like it's pretty likely that they'll be getting a fair bit more plastic support besides the stuff that we've seen. For those less familiar with them, in very brief, they're an elite fighting force within the Imperial Army, which was basically the precursor to the Imperial Guard during the Great Crusade. Normal humans, but generally equipped than the Imperial Guard are in the more current 40k setting. The Solar Auxilia had void armor and las rifles, and general training and martial prowess that didn't put them all that far behind Space Marines, at least in Imperial hierarchy and standing. They were still generally entrusted to more mundane roles, like guarding freshly conquered space or grinding sieges, compared with the flashier Astartes jumping around and conquering great swathes of territory or fighting against specific alpha level threats. Given that we know that we've got some infantry and at least one sentinel coming, there's plenty of other things that look like they could be in really good lineup for getting replacements in plastic. I feel like it's almost certain that we'd probably get some Charonite Ogrins, another unit that featured prominently in the Legions Imperialis release. Probably some options for creating specialist infantry, maybe flamer sections or storm sections. I feel like the Ethon Heavy Sentinel seems like it will be very likely to get its own release alongside the regular smaller one that we've seen today. And there's the possibility for getting some Heresy Era armour on the table, maybe things like Heresy Era Rosses like the Infernus pattern or Malcador tanks, or potentially their dedicated transport, the Dracosan transport that you can see on the top right here. I'd guess that we'd get at least a fair amount of hits on that checklist, though I suppose we'll see exactly how many. In any case though, it might be interesting enough if you did want to collect an army of these guys, and some of the kits could certainly have applications for 40k, Imperial Guard in particular. You should be able to get your hands on them far cheaper than Forge World resin after the update, and improve accessibility to those who want them. Finally, for the Heresy Era teasers, we also had a really quite clear Space Marine standard bearer. Not sure whether this guy would be a plastic miniature in a larger set, or a resin miniature standalone character. From the turnaround, it does just basically look like a Space Marine in older school armour, carrying a big standard into battle. I noticed that same Reddit user had also posted a more colour differentiated version of the same image as well, so credits to Mr. Wizard Blundermore there. You can definitely get a bit more of a feeling of his character there. Looks like the model isn't wearing a helm and instead he's carrying it under his arm, and he's got some Imperial Fist iconography going on. Not sure if that would be something that's actually sculpted on and might be a specific Imperial Fist standard bearer. Seems to me that it might be a bit more likely that it's more of a generic miniature though. In any case, let me know your thoughts on the hints and teasers for the Heresy. Would you have any interest in collecting a Solar Auxilia army if Games Workshop did indeed come out with plastic kits for them? Look forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I do tend to cover 40k things most days, though it is fun to keep tabs on releases for Heresy miniatures too. Plenty of cross-application and interesting stuff coming for the grim darkness of the far future there. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons get a few advantages like seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.